All right, ready to dive in. Today we're looking at chapter 13 of the Quran.
Thunder, right.
Yeah, thunder. We'll be working with an English translation.
Makes it a bit easier for everyone.
For sure. But even in translation, this chapter is, well, it's packed with big ideas. Faith, creation, justice, what happens after we're gone.
You jump right into the deep end, huh? And you're not wrong. This chapter starts off feeling almost cosmic, you know?
I get that vibe. What's hitting you right off the bat?
Those opening verses, it's like, boom, here's this incredible creation story. Heavens without pillars holding them up, the sun and the moon in this perfect dance, and then the earth. Mountains, rivers, all kinds of fruit.
It's almost visual. You can picture it.
Right. Vast, but at the same time, everything's got its place. Also perfectly ordered.
It's amazing. But then verse 5 pops up, and it's like a little challenge tucked in there.
Which part were you thinking of?
The one that asks, when we become dust, will we be in a new creation? It almost feels directed at anyone who doubts the idea of coming back to life.
Absolutely. That challenge goes to the core of Islamic belief. The concept of tawhid, the oneness of God.
Okay, break that down for me. What's that all about?
Tawhid means understanding that Allah is it, the sole creator, sustainer of everything. That includes having the power to bring us back even after we're dust.
So creation and resurrection, they're like two sides of the same coin, both driven by Allah's power.
You got it. But some people, they always want proof. Like in verse 6, show us a miracle, then we'll believe.
Oh, I know that type.
It's not just an Islamic thing either. Think about prophets throughout history. Across religions, cultures, they face that same skepticism. Show us a sign. But the Quran is clear. A prophet's main job is to warn, to deliver the message.
It's not about magic tricks, right?
Exactly. Like if a doctor says, hey, change your lifestyle or you'll get sick, you don't demand they perform surgery right there to prove it.
Good point. You trust their knowledge. It's a different kind of faith.
Right. It's not blind. It's about trusting in something bigger than what we see right in front of us.
Okay, well, speaking of bigger than us, verses 8 and 9 kind of blew my mind a little.
Oh, yeah. Those are intense.
It's the way Allah's described. Knowing everything. What we see, what we don't see. The grand, the supreme. It's overwhelming.
Total knowledge, right. Past, present, future, all of it. It makes you think about, well, do we really have free will if Allah knows everything that's going to happen? That's a question people have been wrestling with for ages. Goes to the heart of how we understand ourselves and the divine.
So much to think about there. I might need a minute to unpack that one. But hey, we're talking thunder.
Right.
Maybe let's get a little more grounded for a second.
Good idea. Verses 12 through 15, that's where the thunder really comes in. It's this massive force. Terrifying, but also, I don't know, kind of awesome.
Oh, yeah, I feel that. Like when there's a huge clap of thunder, it makes you realize how small you are.
It's a good reminder. But the thing is, those verses tie thunder to tasbih, glorifying God. The thunder praises his glory, it says, and so do the angels in awe of him.
Wow, it's like this massive choir echoing through the universe.
Everything in creation praising and glorifying Allah, even the angels, pure light, and they're in awe.
You almost feel insignificant next to that.
But we're all part of it, you know? It connects to what comes next, too, choosing the right path. Those verses, 16 and 18, they're full of these questions.
What kind of questions?
Like, who is the true God? Can anyone else protect you? Challenges people to think. It's a call to reject shirk.
Sure.
Associating anything else with God. Gotta embrace Allah's power completely, recognize that connection and submit to it.
So, consciously choosing to align yourself with the divine will, it's a lot, though. How do we even know what that is?
That's where things get interesting. Verse 17, the parable of the froth.
Oh, I like that one. Very vivid.
It's about priorities, what matters in life.
Okay, but how does froth? How does that fit in?
Think about it. Froth. Those bubbles on water, they disappear so quickly. That's like all the worldly stuff. Possessions, temporary pleasure, gone in a flash.
But the water stays.
Exactly. What's left behind, what actually nourishes? It's our faith. Good deeds. Those are the things that truly last.
So don't get caught up in the shiny, temporary stuff. Focus on what matters.
You got it.
Makes you think, for sure.
And it's a great example of how the Quran teaches, using stuff we all know, like bubbles, to explain these deep spiritual truths.
Like a story with a deeper meaning. But what about the people who don't get the message? I mean, there's got to be consequences, right? Oh, there are. And that's where things get pretty intense. Verses 19 through 35, it's like a fork in the road. Two destinies laid out.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are we talking about here?
On one side, there's the reward for the righteous, gardens of paradise. It describes some of these beautiful, lush places, everything you could desire. And then there's the other side.
For those who reject Allah.
Right. It talks about the torment of hellfire, powerful images,
Yeah.
meant to steer people towards doing good and show them what happens if they stray.
Eternal bliss or eternal suffering. It's a pretty stark contrast. Yeah. And those concepts, Jannah, paradise, and Jahannam, hell, they're central to Islam.
So it's not just about following the rules blindly. It's about understanding what's at stake, what our choices really lead to.
Exactly. Aligning your life with Allah's will is the ultimate goal.
It's about choosing the path that brings you closer to God. But, speaking of paths, that leads us right into verses 36 to 43. The idea that Allah's message, it's universal. It's not just for one specific group.
Right. Revealed in Arabic, sure. But the Quran says this message, it's for all people, all times, all cultures.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, considering when it was revealed.
Over 1,400 years ago.
Exactly. So even though there's a specific historical context, the core of the message, it goes beyond that.
It does. It speaks to something universal in us, this need for meaning, for connection. And the Quran, it offers a way to fulfill that.
This is fascinating, but we've covered so much already. Maybe this is a good spot to take a break.
Sounds good to me.
Listener, we're going to pause here for now, but stick with us. There's so much more to unpack in Thunder.
So, that idea that the Quran's for everyone, it really comes through in verses 38 and 39. It's talking about all the prophets who came before Muhammad.
Each with their own revelation, right?
Yeah, each one suited to that specific time, those people.
Like this thread of guidance running through history. And then the Quran comes along.
Right. And verse 39, it gets really interesting. It actually says Allah can change or abrogate earlier revelations, but then it makes it clear. The Quran, that's the final one. The complete guide for all of humanity until the end of time.
So it's saying religious understanding can evolve, but ultimately the Quran is the authority.
That's the point. But it's not about just blindly accepting it either.
What do you mean?
Verse 40, it puts so much emphasis on doing something, not just for the prophet, but for everyone who believes.
What does it say exactly?
It says, whether we show you some of what we have promised them, or we cause you to die, your duty is to inform, and ours is the reckoning. Like, no matter what, you got to spread the message, live by it, and trust Allah to handle the rest.
It's about putting in the work, even if you don't see results right away. Kind of like planting a seed. You have faith that it'll grow.
Perfect analogy. And that takes us to the end of the chapter, verses 41 to 43. Man, they finish strong. There's this image of Allah diminishing the earth at its edges.
Wow, powerful image.
Right, total control, even over the end of the world.
Makes you think, this life, it's temporary, just the beginning. And we're accountable for what we do here.
That's the point. Verse 42 says, no matter how much people scheme and plan, Allah's plan is the one that matters. He sees everything. And those who reject him, well, they'll face the consequences.
It's kind of scary, but also, reassuring.
Yeah.
That there's a bigger plan, that justice will prevail.
And it ends with this ultimate challenge to anyone doubting the prophet. Verse 43, those who disbelieve say, you are not a messenger. Say, Allah is a sufficient witness between me and you, and whoever has knowledge of the scripture. It's like, mic drop.
Leaves you speechless.
The Quran does that. It makes you think, it inspires awe, and sometimes it just throws down a challenge you can't ignore.
We've covered so much. Creation, prophets, faith, what happens after we die. This deep dive, it's just scratching the surface of the Quran.
It is, but it's a good starting point for anyone listening who's maybe new to this, exploring the Quran.
Any advice on how to approach it? It can feel overwhelming.
Just come to it with an open heart. Be curious. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Look for different interpretations. Make it your own journey.
Find what resonates with you.
Exactly. There are commentaries, translations, lectures, even groups you can join to study together. Find what works for you and just dive in.
Love that. It's your own personal path. But before we go too far down that road.
You're right. Let's loop back to our listener.
This whole deep dive, it's for them, after all. So listener, after spending all this time with us in Thunder, what's sticking with you? What image, what idea just won't let go?
That's the real test, isn't it? It's easy to get lost in all the academic stuff. But the Quran, it's meant to touch your heart. So think about those verses that really hit you, the ones that stuck in your mind.
What images stayed with you?
Right, the imagery. And ask yourself, how does this change how I see faith, how I see creation? What about the whole point of life? What does this tell me about that?
Big questions. We've touched on some huge ideas, haven't we?
Uh,
Allah as the creator, the role of prophets, this life being temporary and what comes next being, well, forever.
it's a lot, but this deep dive, it's really just a tiny taste of the Quran. It's a starting point.
The beginning of your own exploration.
Exactly. The Quran, it's meant to be read and reread. Think about it, talk about it with others. Every time you come back to it, you might find something new, some deeper meaning you didn't see before.
It's a journey, not a destination. But for our listener who's maybe just starting out with the Quran, I mean, it's complex, right? Where do you even begin?
Honestly, come to it with an open heart. Be ready to learn. Don't be afraid to ask questions, to look for different ways people have interpreted it. Make it personal.
Get your own?
Yeah. There's so much out there. Commentaries, different translations, lectures. There are even study groups, if that's your thing. Find what speaks to you.
Approach it with curiosity. A little humility doesn't hurt either.
That's it. You're not expected to have all the answers right away. It's your journey. Let the words guide you.
Beautiful. Your own path of growth.
And, maybe one day, our listener, you'll be leading your own deep dive into the Quran, sharing what you've learned with others.
I love that. But as we wrap things up here with Thunder, we'll leave you with one last thought. We talked about Tasbih, right? Everything praising Allah.
Even thunder, the angels.
Exactly. But what if we took that further? What if we saw every action we take, every choice we make? What if that was a form of worship? A way to align ourselves with the divine will?
Interesting.
How would that change how we see our daily lives? Our work, our relationships, everything. Just something to think about.
A lot to ponder.
We'll leave you with that. Until next time, keep diving deep.